Hey everybody, and welcome to another case study. This time it's a website for a B2B startups in the electronics industry. Super interesting. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, what's up? It's been a while since I did my last case study. This is a project that I've been working on for the past 3 months. Super excited to share this with you because it's a really interesting process. So I'm sure you'll enjoy seeing the ups, downs, the crises, everything that happened during this process. Before we dive into the process and the design, I want to give a little context about the company and the challenge. So the company's name is Pretendtex. It's a company in the electronics industry that was started by people who are super veterans, experts in the electronics industry. They founded Mellanox, which is another huge company in the electronics space, recently bought by NVIDIA. So they are like really experts in their industry, and this new company is doing something very innovative. I'll try to explain it for laymen like me and you who don't really understand how microchips are manufactured and created and designed. Basically what they're doing on a high level is creating and implementing some kind of agents that are put down inside the chip, and later on when the chip is going through its lifetime being produced and then later on in the fields, they can help them, among other things, prevent, get alerts before failures and get all these new information that wasn't accessible before. So this is really groundbreaking for people who are really deep into understanding how this industry works. One of the challenges was here that what they're doing technically is so complicated that to communicate that fast inside a website where you know that most people are going to leave if they don't understand something within 15 minutes, that was a big challenge. The second challenge, which was very complicated to think about, was the fact that they basically have 4 different types of customers in different industries, and so you want to talk to everybody, but each one of them has kind of a different value proposition and interest in the company. And so one of the options was to create 4 different kind of home pages or landing pages for each of them, but basically you still need to tell the story of the company. And how do you tell a story of the company when you don't want to tell one story that's relevant only to one type of customer and alienate maybe another type of customer? That was a lot of what we were thinking. Before we even got into the web project, we did kind of a process about the story of the company. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but basically we gave that a lot of thought, and that was one of the challenges when thinking about web design, when thinking about creating a homepage. How do you communicate all those things very quickly? So let's get started with the process. So when I first got started on this project with them, I did a website kickoff with them. By the way, as you can see, I'm presenting the presentation that I presented them is with their branding, which I did on a previous project with them. And they actually, the CEO of the company actually told me, when you present to us, don't present with your branding, present with our branding. That's how we feel that you're part of the company. So that's one tip I got from there. So basically the first meeting always revolves around those 3 things: the goals of the website, what content should be in the website, and the look and feel. And basically it's a pretty short presentation. It's just like discussion around these points. So we're sitting in a meeting and we're discussing, what do you think are the goals? What do you want to achieve with the website as a company? What you're trying to achieve here? Is it like getting more leads, converting people, so sales or awareness or hiring? So every company might have different goals when they're building their website, but also what do you think is the goal of somebody who's visiting the website? Why are they visiting? What do they want to discover and learn about the company? Are we helping them to do that? And also defining what will be a success for this project. In this specific case, I can say that the high-level goals were to create interest, as I said previously, because what they're doing is so technically complicated. They just wanted to create intrigue around what they're doing so that they can facilitate the discussion later on, and also to look established, look high quality and stuff like that. Because a lot of people they were talking with on the phone Googled them and they wanted them to see something impressive in a way. Then we talk about the content, and in this case, this is basically a slide that I can show most of my client because it's general stuff that might go on a website, but in this specific case, I kind of changed a few things to make it more relevant for them. But we go over this again. Those are basically top talking points. So we go through them and we think, would you want to have blog on your website? Do you think that we should show the team and have jobs? And each client usually says something else about each one of those points. So this is basically to understand kind of the scope of the website. The last thing is to kind of understand their look and feel, whether they want to go in terms of visuals or not. I also bring up some of my references that I think are relevant for this for this project. Again, not in terms of let's do something like this, but I want to see how they react to certain things. And here in this case, let me show you a few of the examples. So two websites that we really liked, they really liked, and I thought can be relevant were this page. This is the OnCorp's website. Actually, this was designed by Hiko, a studio that I really like, and it was actually built on Webflow. I actually didn't know this when I showed this to them. I only discovered this later, but I thought this was really nice in terms of, they use some abstract backgrounds and images to communicate something that is very kind of like data oriented. Also, I liked this kind of an abstract animation that helped to convey something like, there was a mess before and now you can see the pattern. I really like how they communicated this vague idea with animation. So that was one reference that I used. The second one was this website of Plethora, which also kind of what I liked here is that they showed something very technical happening and then notifications around that, which is because, as I said, we're getting now alerts from the chip and notifications from the chip and from, complex electronic systems. I thought this kind of like something in the background that is more like wireframe or technical and with notification on top of that can be very interesting. So those are two websites that I kind of showed to them. And they also felt like, again, there were a couple of more, but those were the ones that I thought were relevant. And they also figured out that they were relevant. And so we said, let's try to work with something around that area visually. Again, we already have kind of a brand book in terms of colors, logos, and that stuff. But since we're going to use more visuals on a website and more visualization, what kind of website do we want to go? I also showed kind of like their competitions website, which they didn't like because it was too complicated. There was too much text on stuff. So it really helped me gain the understanding of they were looking for something impressive, clean, nice. And that helped kind of move the discussion along. Now, usually this time we had to break it down into two meetings. Usually I do this on the same meeting. So I also try to brainstorm the structure of the content based on what we were talking on here. Try to break it down into what pages do we actually need in the website. So for the second meeting, I brought this page to show them kind of like, I think that at this stage we need 4 pages. Later on, when we did the discussion, we figured out maybe this should actually be 3 different pages instead of 1 page. So this might be kind of a category of pages, but this is kind of like content architecture for the website. And again, this is a discussion. I bring this to tell them, here's what I think, what do you think? And then we kind of collaborate on that. Also on that second meeting, I've presented what I think the timeline for like even more, when I did the proposal, I obviously gave them a timeline, but at that point where we kind of narrowed down the scope, that was really like more with fixed date. When do we think that we're going to have everything ready? And you know what? Looking at it right now, development done in March 31. We've actually hit the deadline and the timeline, so that worked well. After we did that, after we kind of had the content architecture and all the content and pages in mind, I moved to the wireframing stage. So as a first thing, I kind of sketch wireframes in my notebook. And this is really just because I feel easy to test out different layouts and see how the content will fit in the page. After I did all the pages actually in my notebook, I actually moved this into, let me close this, move this into Figma. Let me open up my Figma file. All right, so this is the wireframes that I've created in Figma. As you can see, it's more or less what we have here in terms of structure. It's more or less the same thing, but when I do my wireframes, I put in content, even though it's not the final content and I'm not like an official copywriter. And in this project, we did work with a professional copywriter, specifically because I'm not a native English speaker. I have a lot of mistakes in English, as you can hear. So we worked with a native speaker as a content writer, but I did put in the kind of like fundamentals of the text in terms of what I think should be there. And the reason that we're working on Figma is because it allows for collaboration. So I've created those wireframes. I've gave editing access to the content writer and to the client, so they'll be able to maintain and update the websites while I'm starting to work on the design. So that was the first stage, creating all the pages here on Figma, starting to collaborate on them while I was starting to move the design further along. So in terms of the design, so that was one thing that was going on, and during that phase, I already started working on the visual development of the website. So for the visual side, I decided to collaborate with Mike from Creative Mints. He's a designer based in Prague, really amazing designer, as you can see here from his dribble. And he has a lot of, he likes to do a lot of illustrations, some of them 3D, some of them not. And I thought this could be a really interesting way to maybe illustrate some of the concepts that are really abstract, not abstract, but they're very, very technical. And we're trying to find an abstract way to tell the story of, an agent in a chip. What does that mean? Literally it's code, but you need some way to tell the story of what happens once those agents are embedded in a chip. So we started talking about collaboration, and we decided we're going to be working together. And what we wanted to do as an initial stage was to first design just a hero, just to see that we have kind of an agreement between ourselves and later on with the client as well regarding the visual style of the website, and then later on develop the rest of the website. So let me show you the first kind of round of iteration. That's actually the first. So this is actually the first thing that Mike sent me. And so we decided together, we had some brainstorming sessions regarding should we do this kind of a vector illustration, 3D illustration, and we decided we want to go with the 3D way. I explained to him kind of like the abstract of what those agents do and how they communicate, and he tried to come up with this illustration of this microchip with 3 agents on top that are kind of like radiating and communicating. So this was, I guess, a good start, but there were a few things here that are, the first one, it was really off-brand in terms of, their branding was mainly white with blue and orange. So the first thing was to really dramatically change the visual aspect, and I think that this color scheme already made the website much more cleaner and much more on brand, but also much more lighter, and I guess maybe tacky would be the right word. After we did this, we started to iterate on this image, which I didn't feel was good enough. Specifically here, we have these kind of like radiating towers. At the beginning, it was something like, very abstract, like this circles here. Then we moved into maybe those are kind of like radio towers. And we tried multiple ways of showing those communication. But eventually we said, all right, maybe these are the right colors, and we'll try to stick to that. So this is basically the first concept that we had for the hero design, and I took this back to the client and to get some feedback and also think about how to progress from here. Now, at this point of the process, 2 things happen. First one is that because they had unexpectedly were giving the opportunity to present their company on a huge event, and we saw that it takes a lot of time for them to finalize the text, we decided to change the scope from launching with the website with 5 pages to just launching with 1 page, change the structure a little bit. Let me go back to the Figma. So instead of having this here as a home page, which is basically just, telling here about 3 phases in the chip design and in the chip life cycle, and then a little bit about what they do and why it matters. try to change that into something that is a little bit more comprehensive, but we only are going to go with one page at that point, at launch point, which is actually today. So we changed the structure of the website to this. But the other thing is that we understood that we really have to tell the story of the whole, what they call chip lifecycle, which is all the process from the chip, from it being designed to being produced, to being put into a system, and then being out there in the world. We have to find a way to tell that whole story very, very quickly. Otherwise, again, if somebody from the fourth, let's say, section comes to the website, it doesn't understand that this is relevant for them, it might be very, very confusing. So I came up with the idea of, hey, let's do kind of an animation that's really going to show this chip through its whole lifetime, from it being designed to being produced until it's out there in the world. Find an abstract way to tell that story, and maybe kind of create kind of a timeline so that people that come into the website, the first thing that they see is this timeline, and they realize that this kind of process helps with the chip throughout its life cycle. And so we actually changed the layout to something like this, where we have kind of like the illustration around here, a headline here, and then we have this kind of a timeline that I imagined would be interactive. And at that point, I've asked Mike, look, would you be comfortable doing an animation like that? And he actually told me, look, I can do a little bit of animation, but I'm more, let's say, strong on UI animation rather than full 3D animation. So perhaps I'm not the best one to do the animation. As you can see, he can model in 3D, but to animate and take that into a really video production level, it was a little bit too much. So what I did was I reached out to my friend Diambo, who's really an amazing 3D production studio, worked with like amazing clients, as you can see here, Google Cloud, Xiaomi, a lot of like amazing project. We've collaborated before. And I actually saw some works here on his website that I thought might be like good references. Except this one, for example, for this mobile device. I'm not going to show you the whole video right now, but there was a frame there where he kind of like abstractly show the chip inside the mobile phone, and I was like, yeah, maybe we can do something like that. So I reached out to Yambo, which he's always a great guy to work with. I was like, dude, we're very limited on time. We have like 2 weeks to produce this animation that we want to have at the hero of the website, and here's the idea. So to demonstrate the idea, I actually created this this kind of a mock-up, which I really fastly created pretty fast on Keynote, just to show him what I want to do. So basically the first step is maybe a chip during its production, and you see some kind of notification about it. Then it's being part of a wafer, which is how you basically you produce chips. Then it's being added into kind of a board, a system, and then it's live in the field, and there are others around it. So this is very, very an abstract, I guess, maybe storyboard for this animation that I envisioned. And I brainstormed this with Yambo, who was really, really cool. He actually brought up this project from Microsoft, which is really an amazing video. I'm not going to show it, but you can see some of the visual styles here on their Behance page. This is a project that was done by Tandril, another amazing studio. So he said maybe this kind of visual style would be fitting for the brand, because I've imagined it also kind of like white on white and floating around in the air. So we looked at this visual and we said, yeah, let's try and do something around this. So let me show you how the first renders from Yambo came out. Let me open that up. Okay, so the first thing that he sent me, or let's open this up. All right, so the first one is basically, this is a chip with maybe some kind of agents on top of it, floating on top of it, and then we're kind of zooming out. And this was basically initial idea. And he sent me this alongside all kinds of explorations that he did regarding, lighting and texture. So this is when maybe the agent is actually a hole that allows you to see what goes inside the chip. Some more tests, visual for different textures. And when I saw this, I mean, I said, wow, this looks amazing. I mean, it's really beautiful, but it doesn't look like those agents are embedded in the chips, and it's really not clear what their relationship is. And honestly, this little hole that you did here is actually more accurate in terms of the concept, like what these are. So let's try and think about how we can visualize this way. So on the second round that he sent me, we showed the agent as kind of chips, like colorful chips, because there are multiple types of agents. And you can kind of see like what goes on inside, like the electricity here. And then you can see this is already when the chip is being placed inside of a board. And then the chip is being kind of like, this was supposed to look like something like a server farm. But for me, so this was a good improvement, but there were still problems with this design as well. Some of them were that, first of all, what goes inside here, the electronic symbols, I know that it looks right, maybe like electricity to you, but for people who understand chip design, this is not how the inside of the chip looks like. So that was a feedback that the client gave, like we can't do that this way. And also they're not going to look opened all together, and there's many, the client gave some feedback as to why this is not an accurate representation of what's going on. In terms of this, we wanted to show something a little bit more abstract, not like they're being put in a closet or a server farm, but really like they're out there in the world. I've imagined kind of a fleet of ships like in space, like everyone is floating in different direction. So that was the second round, and as you can see, there's many more rounds to come. The third round, let's see how third round. Okay, so the third round, we came to kind of the idea of putting like little LEDs inside, and then they would kind of maybe open up and you would see what goes inside of them. So that was kind of like the idea for that round. Let me see if we have that. Okay, and then the fourth round, let's see how that looks like. Okay, so this is almost like the final iteration already. I probably didn't show you everything, but you can see that we have a LED here that opens up, and every time you see something else, then we see this is actually a wafer. This is how you produce chips in kind of a circle thing. And then it goes down here. As you can see, this is not a final render. This is just so we can see how this goes. And then we have kind of a bunch of ships rolling around. So this is almost like the final thing. We did have a lot of iteration just to make sure that the layout is fine, because I wanted some text here on the left, and we had to make sure that the illustration is always within boundaries on the right side, just to it makes sense on the website. This is, I'm jumping already to the last version, and in the last version I've actually made some notification. This is how they come up. So those are the notifications that come up. This was added in post-production, that actually shows kind of like the data that is being sent out of those agents. So at every step you get different notification, different information, and this is how the last iteration of the video looks like. I think it looks pretty great. And it actually has 2 loops with 2 different notification schemes. And as you can see, it kind of runs in a loop. So one thing that was very important for us is that it would end on a clear screen so that we can seamlessly loop it into another loop. So this was the whole process of creating the hero animation. Let's go back into the actual design. So the next step was to take this new design from the hero concept that we have into the new layout, which is, this is the updated design. As you can see, this is not the final renders, because Mike and Yambo were working at parallel, and I was syncing up everything and giving feedback to both of them. So this is almost at the end of the process. Mike did here 3 types of illustrations. Here we were thinking about putting some of the renders from the video, and basically this was another iteration on the design. We had a lot of feedback on this, not a lot, but those icons had some changes both in terms of style and content. This whole agent section, we decided to basically, a lot of the feedback wasn't around how it visually looks, but how it makes sense to read this. So one thing that we decided that we want to do, this is the new version of illustrations here, is to have kind of a fixed menu here on the left in this section where you're actually going through those four stages, and have that fixed while you scroll through those images with notifications on them. And the same thing happens here. We wanted to show 3 different types of agents that you can scroll through. Now, this is something that maybe you understand as I'm talking this to you right now, but it was pretty hard for me to explain this to Mike and also to mock this up Mike is actually working here in Photoshop. So it's really hard to simulate this kind of an interaction where you have a fixed menu and then the images changes and some interactions happen. So this is kind of the limitation of designing with a software that is kind of fixed. And I'll show you later what happens when I move this into Webflow and how you can really see how this functions. So basically, this is the last iteration. This is actually when Mike finished, he sent the PSD files to me, and I actually did the final iteration myself when working with the client based on the feedback. So kind of make sure that the notification looks good. Put the notifications here on the images themselves. As you can see, changed a little bit the illustration here, and this is basically the same thing. This is more or less stay the same. So once that was ready, once the design was ready and approved, by the way, to show this static design with the video in the background. So when I show this to the client, I actually had to show them 2 different things. I had to show them the video, and I had to show them the kind of the mock-up for the website and tell them, imagine that this goes here with the text and with kind of a timeline on top of it. That was pretty it did require some creative imagination in terms of the client trusting me that it will look good when it comes together. Specifically when I showed them this and it was still all work in progress, it did require a little bit of imagination, but I have to say that the clients were super cool, and they were kind of like flowing with me and allowing me the kind of the creativity and the creative freedom to test these things out and make sure that it will look good at the end. So at the last phase, okay, so let me jump into Webflow and show you the last phase where the website is. First of all, let me show you the website developed. So this is how the website looked like, and what we have here, as you can see, while the video is playing here, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but we have the timeline here that's running and shows you where you are in the production process at any given time. So this is pretty cool to sync that with the video. It was a pretty cool challenge to do. So those are the agent steps. As you can see here, as I told you before, you can see that we have this kind of a sticky menu here that shows you where you are in the process at all times. So this is sticky, and those are kind of like changing, and you can also use this to kind of navigate which phase of the process is most interesting for you. Also on this here, on these agent steps, we have here, now you can see that we're talking about this layer, and at this point we're adding this layer. So all these things, which were actually kind of easy to put together on Webflow, it was really hard to explain the client and also Mike how this would actually work, or how I envisioned this to work on the actual website. Yeah, basically all you can see here is like tiny little interactions, but basically this is the website, which is complete. Also was a pretty fun challenge to optimize this for mobile. Let me pull up my mobile to show this to you, because the layout had to be very different to make sure that it works, and that, you know, we couldn't take the video as it is. So I actually had to change the layout to kind of crop, I don't know if you can see here this, but like crop the video in kind of a circle. I had to remove the timeline because there were not enough space on the mobile to show this. But the rest of the website looks pretty good on mobile as well. So this is it. And last week, it was a pretty intensive week. You know, I had to almost until the last day when we put the website live. The animation wasn't ready yet, the design wasn't finalized, so everything came together last week, and we put the website live last week. So that was pretty intense and exciting week to work on. The actual building in Webflow took between 6 and 7 hours, which I thought was incredible. In terms of the result, like to pull that off in like 6 hours, it's true that it was 6 hours across like 3 days, and it was pretty intensive because there were some things here that were kind of tricky to get right, but I still think this is pretty impressive, and I'm really, really happy with how this work turned out. I'm really happy to have been like collaborating with super, super talented people on this project, and with an amazing client that allowed us to do really creative and good work, I think. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this case study. I really enjoyed putting it together. And if you want to learn how to use Webflow to build websites like the one I showed you right now within 6 or 7 hours, and making your design business super profitable along the way, besides creating an awesome website, please check my Webflow Masterclass. There's a link below this video in the description. Check it out if you think this can be helpful for you. I'll see you on the next case study. Bye-bye.